Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jyoti, and today I'm interviewing Bente from DTU Civil Engineering. And recently, I come across an article on DTU Inside about one of the student representing DTU at a national level competition called PhD Cup. And I really got excited to know what was the motivation behind participating in this PhD Cup. So today, Bente is actually going to share her experience about why she decided to participate in PhD Cup, about her research, and I hope that everybody who's watching this video will find something useful and motivating, and will participate and represent DTU in a coming future. So, Bente, thank you for accepting my invitation for this interview. And before I go into detail about PhD Cup, can you introduce yourself to our viewers who are watching this video?
Yeah, sure, and thank you for inviting me. Right, my name is Bente. I am 31 years old. I grew up in the countryside here in Zealand, an hour southwest of Copenhagen. Um, I did my undergrad as well as graduate studies at DTU Environmental Engineering. Yeah, and then I took on a job as a consultant before I also ended up doing an industrial PhD. And generally for my work, my research work, it's centered around harmful contaminants in the environment. Whereas for now, I'm also trying to move into harmful contaminants in building materials. So that's just shortly what I do.
That's cool. So, Bende, why you choose DTU to do your PhD when you had such an exciting experience, such a valuable? Why you choose DTU? Why do you think DTU is a good place to do PhD in your topic?
Honestly, I never really considered anything else. To me, DTU is a really good match. There's a lot of professional people working there and studying there as well, a lot of passion and motivation, and just the whole infrastructure at DTU, well, both physically but also system-wise, suits me very well. I feel like I get sort of the freedom and the boundaries to work in a way that fits me well. So yeah, I don't know. It seemed really obvious to do it at DTU.
Okay. And I have gone through some of part of your research project. I see you have a very exciting collaborators like COVI and US Army Crops. What was the influence? How do you coordinate when you have a multiple stakeholders in your project, and what is their influence on your research project?
Right. So the project was a partnership between DTU Civil Engineering and COVI, which is it's actually a global consultancy.
Mhm.
Then the capital region of Denmark, and also the US Army Corps of Engineers. We designed the project in that way because each of the partners have a different set of insight and wishes and expertise. So with all these people involved, because my research topic, which was on electrochemical remediation of contaminated sites, it's very multidisciplinary. So having experts in each field
Mhm.
would help me out solving some of the struggles I could end up having.
Mhm.
So that's why I had a lot of supervisors.
Okay.
And luckily, I didn't get into so many of the issues as you might often have met people saying that, well, then all of a sudden one supervisor want you to move in one direction, the other in a second, and the third in a third. And yeah, I think my supervisors teamed up very well, and they kept and stick to the same overall goal throughout the project.
Okay.
But it is definitely a larger task on keeping everyone up to date so they don't feel overlooked and still have an opinion on the process, and just to get the best out of their expertise as well.
Okay. So let's come back to a very recent achievement of yours, which was highlighted and DTU Insight. How did you know about PhD Cup, and what was the motivation behind participating in PhD Cup?
Right. I think actually every year, I remember it as being in the fall, but
Mhm.
at least every year when the call for PhD Cup is open, DTU is posting an announcement on DTU Inside.
Okay.
So that was how I was aware that now it's actually time for signing up. But I also watched the show last year in the television.
Okay.
And watching it, I was like, oh, that seems really exciting and also very terrifying.
Okay.
And that just made me into it in a way. I like to challenge my own comfort zone. So when I got the opportunity, I just signed up. When you sign up, you have to write a 3 to 4 pages written dissemination, and then I think it's up to 2 minutes oral video presentation as well.
Okay.
So I made both of the materials and submitted it. And then I was so lucky to get selected as one of the 5 finalists.
Wow.
I think my whole motivation for signing up is manifold, actually. First of all, because I think communication and dissemination is really, really essential. So getting an opportunity to actually learn from an actor on how to get out with your message, that was like really appealing to me. Also just to get to disseminate my research to a like huge crowd as it is when it's on national television was a fantastic opportunity. I wouldn't really meet anywhere else, I think. At least it would take a lot more work to get out as far as PhD Cup does. And then, of course, to brand myself, but also to put focus on my research topic and why it's important to keep investing in remediating contaminated sites. So yeah, there's a lot of good reasons for participating and not really any for not doing it.
I think you have really highlighted a very important point about importance of communication, scientific communication. We engineers are very good at doing research, but we also lack. This is a kind of like lack of soft skill for many people, that they don't able to communicate their scientific knowledge to for very people who are not from the same site. So I think it must be a very, very horrifying experience. Also, maybe make you anxious and all. So have you received, what kind of support you have received? Let's say you got selected and you went into final 5, and what was the support you have received from organizers? Can you take us through the process, until how many days it took for you to prepare, and how did you balance your research while you're doing this side activity?
Right. Well, maybe I will start with the last point. I was very fortunate that my employer, being DTU, and my supervisor allowed me to also spend time on preparing for PhD Cup as a part of my work.
Okay.
So I also spent a lot of my spare time doing it, but it was flexible, so that made it a lot easier. Then the process. So I was told back in the end of February that I was selected as a finalist. And then the original plan was that the show should be in the end of April.
Okay.
But then something happened in the world. Corona came about. So it was delayed a month, and then another half a month. So it all was supposed to be over with within 2 months, but ended up taking 3.5 months. And because of all the uncertainty in the society, in the beginning, nothing really happened.
Okay.
So in that time, I think it was the first probably 1.5 months, I was just on my own working on, so what is, like, because you only have 3 minutes to disseminate your research, and there's so much to say. So to narrow it down, what is the most important points of my research, and also what is most important to frame the topic. That I spend a lot of time on my own and discussing forward and back and timing it a little bit just to have a sense of, am I on track or is it far too long? And it was far too long. But then in the middle of April, we had a session individually with an actor.
Actor.
Yeah. So the first session was about how to structure the speech. So I was coming up with my suggestion, and then she would come up with some inputs to make it more clear and more exciting for the general public. Because a lot of the details that I find interesting maybe not so interesting for the
Yes.
general crowd.
Yes.
Whereas other parts of it would be instead. So that we worked on in the first session and got some tips and tricks on how to prepare a speech that would be very fluent and easy for me to say, so that it would be easier to remember as well.
Mm-hmm.
Then I think 2 weeks later, no, actually only 1 week later, we had a full day workshop with all the finalists together with the actor, where we did some exercises that, I think if you watch the show in the television, that's the part where most researchers would think that looks terrifying. It's not about making you feel uncomfortable, but that's how it ends up being.
Yes.
And there's a purpose behind it all, and it works out very well. But it seems terrifying when you just watch it. So there we all had to have prepared a full speech, the full 3-minute speech, and then rehearse it in front of each other and get more specific tips and tricks on how to make it even more interesting and exciting and engaged and all that. And then 2 weeks later, in that period, we had time on our own to practice these tricks we learned. And then that 2 weeks later, we had a last session with the actor just individually, where everything had to be more or less set, and we had to know where we wanted to accelerate our speech and speak with a high tone or low tone, and who to look at each point in the speech and all that. So it was just like sharpening up the whole speech, really. And then I think it was another 2 weeks later, the actual show was taking off.
Okay. So it seems there were around 20 to 30 hours of total preparation. You have put around 20 to 30 hours.
I have absolutely no idea. I would say a lot more, because every time I live on a small farm, and every time I went out doing work on the farm, I was like rehearsing all these 3 minutes over and over again. The special thing about this type of communication is that, at least for me, I usually think a lot about what I want to say, like what are my points and how do I say it, maybe like word-wise, but not engagement-wise and body language-wise. So in this type of communication, you have to know exactly what you want to say, and so well that you don't really think about it when you actually have to say it, because you instead have to focus on, who do I look at what time, and what is my body language, and do I speak too fast or too slow, because you have to vary the speed of the speech. And then also the tone of your speech. And so there's so many things to consider that you cannot also focus on what's to say next.
Okay. And also you're now much more confident in terms of public speaking, and because you have gone through a process, and I think you might have feeling now some changes in you, and even you got this publicity at national level, and there may be people approaching you. So what do you see the difference after and before participating in PhD Cup in you and around people, and what kind of opportunities are open now for you?
Right. Just one more comment for the previous question. In nowhere throughout this process I felt alone. The whole organizing committee was really, really supportive. So it's like there's nothing to be terrified about, and you grow throughout the process, so it doesn't seem as terrifying when you're actually in it as just looking at it from the outside. But yeah, what has it done to me? That's a tricky question. I would say nothing, because I'm still the same person. It's not like I feel walking on the street and people getting starstruck. Like it's scientific. So in that sense, nothing has changed, but it has changed my probably also my way of communicating. But at least my eyes have been open towards other aspects of communication, and also I feel less intimidated when staying on a stage.
Okay.
Um, and I think that's the whole reason for doing those exercises with the actor, where you seem a little silly. That's to make you not focus on what you look like on stage, but being in this situation instead. And that has helped me a lot, I would say. It's not like I'm now a pro in this. I have gotten some tips and tricks, and now I have to practice it for every time I would do a dissemination. And also, not all of the tools will work for each type of dissemination. So I would have to tailor-made it every time, and then hopefully one day it will just feel natural.
Definitely. I mean, one of the thing definitely you have done is to go out of your comfort zone,
Yeah.
which is very one of the first step and most typical part where people actually stop. A lot of people tend to stay in their comfort zone, but you have done so. Many congratulations for that. And what is your advice for people who want to pursue something same track? There is a lot of awareness towards public speaking and improving the communication. What is your advice for PhD or even a postdoc at DTU or even other Danish university who like to participate and prepare for this PhD cup or let's say similar events? What is your advice?
I would say do it. Like, there's so much to learn from it, and just getting insight into what it takes to make a program or a show like that is really interesting. And yeah, I never really answered that before, actually. I have been contacted by a lot of people, both individuals, companies, and researchers after participating in PhD Cup. So there's really a lot to win and not anything to lose, I would say. Um, I think, well, there's a lot of books and courses you can take on how to structure a speech and what are the important parts of communicating to the public. And to me, at least, I feel that that gives me some secureness or comfort in knowing just a little bit of the background for, or theory, or call it what you want, and what works and what doesn't. But of course, you cannot learn everything from a book. You have to stand up and talk to yourself a lot. So that's one of the things. You cannot prepare for this kind of things just repeating stuff in your head. You have to speak out loud. Another thing that is really important to remember, as I have learned in this process, is that whenever you do a break or whenever you speak with a high tone or a low tone or what you decide to do, the way you feel it as the one communicating it, it seems really, really drastic and like very dramatic. But the way it's received doesn't seem very like different from what you did just before. So putting in breaks, long and short, just do it, because you will usually never make such a long break that it seems long for the receiver. Yeah, I think the tool we had to, and you don't see that in the show, we had to speak very, very loud when we made the communications for the television. Not because of the television, but because you only get your full voice out if you speak loud. And you don't, it doesn't feel that way when you watch it afterwards. It seems like we just speak naturally. So you have to give a lot as a communicator for it to be received well. And to make an impact on the crowd.
So while you were participating, you had a live audience in front of you.
Actually not. Usually there would be around 250 people, I think. But because of Corona, we only had, but we had the 3 judges and then a whole lot of people working on the set, so filming and voice.
Sorry, you were saying something?
And just people working on the show. So no big crowd this time.
Okay. So my question is, how do you maintain, what is your tips for eye contact when you are speaking very large audience? Where do you look at? How do you change your eye contact with people while you're speaking? Or let's say when you are speaking in front of judges? Were you looking at all judges one time and you were just focused on one judge?
No, I think it depends on whether you speak to a big crowd or a few people.
Mm-hmm.
If you speak to a few people, it's really important that you look at each one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And not just like scanning them. You have to actually get eye contact and maintain it, because otherwise the person you speak to won't feel like you actually speak to them.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you speak to a crowd, it's like a conference. It's easier to just like look at everybody but not really looking at anyone.
Mm-hmm.
That's at least what I usually do. It seems less terrifying. I think it's a good thing actually to try to look into the eyes of just a few people in the crowd. It makes it more personal, and it means it looks like you mean it. Like you talk to someone. It's not just something you say to a big crowd, and then some might find it more interesting than others, and like it becomes more personal if you look into the eyes of people.
And when you end your speech, should we end in a high note or at the low? No. What is your tips at the
Both.
end of both? Okay.
Yeah, nothing. Like you can. It's also really good to speak fast sometimes and slow other times.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as you just vary your speech, it will be a lot more interesting for the listener and also easier to keep them engaged.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you make the same tactic throughout your speech, whether that is a low tone or fast speech or whatever you do,
Mm-hmm.
it will become sort of the same throughout. And then you get bored as a listener. It
Mm-hmm.
just, you cannot really help it unless you feel really interested in the topic. So you should definitely do all, not at the same time necessarily, but change it throughout the speech.
Okay. So now actually, I think we got very valuable information from you, and I think it will help people who have watching you. And so, what is the next for you? What is your future plan? Are you going to participate in more public speaking, or what are the events we should target if somebody really want to go into public speaking domain? What is your future plan in your research also?
Right, so right now I'm in a position where my postdoc is actually ending next month.
Mm-hmm.
I hope to get an extension, but these days it's not the easiest thing to get.
Yeah.
So it's a little uncertain, but communication-wise, I definitely want to continue.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so important to give research back to the society.
Mm-hmm.
And one way of doing that is by communicating your findings.
Okay.
So that I will continue with, also because communication is not just like researcher to, let's say, the general public.
Mm-hmm.
It's also in between employees and, well, in your family. It's, you communicate with everybody, and if you don't get your point received correctly,
Mm-hmm.
all the misunderstanding starts to appear.
Okay.
So just always practicing communication is something I will do.
Okay. I think I have enough information, and I think it was nice talking to you, and you have agreed to speak to me, and thank you so much for that. And I hope people will find information you share very useful, and there are more and more participation next year and coming years from DTU in a PhD Cup, and let's our DTU name shine the national level, and more people win. Thank you for this interview for such a short notice.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. And
Thank you
I
so
really
much.
hope people will just jump into it.
Yeah, I hope so. Have a nice day.
Thank you, and you too.